Welcome everyone to the 792 Sports Podcast. This is our first recording, and we're joined here today by my co-hosts Eric Clark and Doug Pugh. Take it from here.
Hey everyone, we just want to introduce you to the 792 Florida Sports Talk Podcast.
Here in the high school football community. Looking forward to it. Of course, it's a little too early for some of us to be starting the football season, but if I had my way, the football season would be about 14 weeks long. So everybody got 2 bye weeks, plus a little chance to make up for Mama Nature and the monkey wrenches that she likes to throw at us. But looking forward to it. I bet we're going to have some pretty good discussion when it comes to today's agenda and moving forward. So, fellas, looking forward to it.
All right, and with that, we're going to go ahead and hit into the first topic. For some of y'all that may that follow us on some of our social media accounts, I posted my preseason rankings, and we're going to hit on some of the things. Doug, you mentioned yesterday about a certain omission I made, and I'll let you take it from here on that one.
Well, first, I'd love for you to actually kind of go over what your rankings. I want you to kind of give some folks a place where you can kind of send them to. I'd love for you to be able to give me, some opinions on. But most of my gripes, without folks being able to look at the rankings all together at this point, I count 6 teams in those bottom 50, or the bottom 25, and one team that belongs in the top 50 over at least 2 or 3 other teams. So starting from the bottom going up to the top, I see teams like Kathleen, Chamberlain, Eastlake, DeLand, Sandalwood, and Tampa Catholic not even sniffed when, teams like Spruce Creek, Miami Christian, Fort Myers, Belen Jesuit, Bishop Moore, Champagnat, and Orange Park are in there. So even though the beef is not real, the curiosity is probably most real. And, those would be my swaps. Now, Tampa Jesuit certainly is a top 50 team. They are in my backyard here in the Tampa area. I would have them 2 to 3 touchdown favorites over Orange Park. I'd have them 2 to 3 touchdown favorites over Champagnat. When I look at that 2A classification, and we'll get onto it later on in the show, there's just not a whole lot of bite for me. It's the one class that, even though it makes for great competition, teams that, if we're talking about a top 75, which you put out essentially, I would say that there aren't many 2A teams that belong on it, if any, at this point. And it's not a slight on 2A class. It's just, look, there's over 700 teams that play football in this state. So I don't think that you should feel offended that you didn't make the top 75 out of 700 plus. So I think that when you look at the overall concept behind preseason rankings, now Eric knows this first and foremost, because I've put in a lot of work, especially with site Big County Preps, and going back and forth with debate. It took me years to kind of get into the mold. In high school football, there is just not, until we reach data collection levels, guys, that the college and the pros have, there's really not a reliable way to rank teams preseason in high school, especially if you don't have, top of the line data collection, which is, sad to say that's not even remotely close to our reality here, being on the media side and having to collect data. And on top of the fact that you don't have anybody that I know of that has a budget that is big enough to literally travel the entire 792 miles from top to bottom and see all 700 football programs in order to say, hey, I've seen this, I've seen this set of teams. I know what's what. So my whole thing, my whole philosophy is I don't even look at ranking teams in the high schools till minimum week 4, Week 5 is kind of the sweet spot, and then Week 6, if you've got teams that had their bye weeks early in the front half of the season. And if you have been noticing in the last 2 to 3 years, rankings have been all askew because of the fact Mother Nature has wreaked absolute havoc on our scheduling. And it is irrationally inconvenient for teams to be playing 3 games in 6 days, which is what happened to Sarasota Booker not too long ago.
I know that we had. I was gonna say I know that we had to play 2 games in 4 days, just 2 years ago, and they were both ended with losses.
Yeah, until you have the ability. It's not so much the rain. We've got a lot of teams that are putting in turf fields that can handle the rain. What we've got is a big-time problem with centrally funded counties that have to have their schedules done, and those schedules are not flexible. What grass fields we do have become mud bogs because they're not properly maintained, especially in the bigger counties. When you've got, Hillsborough County alone, I think has 28 public schools, something in that range. All of them with their own fields. None of them allowed to maintain their own fields at their leisure. So you have that. You have Dade County where, up until this year with Booker T finally going back to Hendricks Stadium, downtown Miami, you had 5, virtually 6 teams playing at Traz Powell. So the kind of getting off of it, but getting back onto the topic at hand is that it's really, really tough, especially when you throw in the fact that we essentially have free agency during the summer. So, there's so much movement, but I say all that to say this, Hunter and Eric. I say all that to say kudos to anybody that wants to try and put one out. I don't want to sit here and I don't want to sit here and bash folks. I tried it through trial and error. I saw.
To be fair, the free agency deal is one of the reasons why. Wait, sorry that we're having small technical difficulties. It should be working. Sorry about that. I think that was my phone messing up again. But anyway, the free agency type deal was like what, and the reasons why I have Chomp Knot up there a bit higher is based on some of my sources down South Florida. They've been picking up They picked up some pretty big name transfers, especially in that month of July, that really boosted the talent on that team up above what a normal 2A school would be.
Right, and that's a fair point. At the same time, until they get a roster size of about 35 to 40 kids, and of those 35 to 40 kids, you can go about 22 deep. It's pretty. Looking at the schools, the company that they're keeping in that top 50, Hunter, it's a pretty tough ask.
That's a fair point. Though, speaking of other, like a Chop Knot who was, sorry about this. We're having, for some reason, sorry about that again. Like, I don't know, if the thing was working perfectly fine at the start and now it's just glitching and stuff. But,
and here, this is not are you live recording right now?
It is.
Well, it's already going to have to get chopped up because you don't ever want to admit that you're having technical difficulties in real time. So, all right. So let's just kind of keep puzzling through it. But if you're having the issues with it, we probably just have to get to a more reliable source. Maybe we just have to call in on our phones next time.
Okay. So, since Chop Knot, they were a state runner-up in 2A last year. Now we'll move on to the, looking at last year's state champions and where we see them going. We had in 2A we had North Florida Christian defeating Chop Knot Catholic in the 2A finals. Of course, now with the movement that's came to them on the off season, I gotta personally think that they probably are going from runner-up to probably state favorite this year.
So you just never can tell in that 2A class. You know when a team like Champagnat is gearing up, but then you also don't know how those guys are going to mesh together. You also don't know who's what's going on with the coaching staff or whatnot, or who left. the one thing that's consistent about NFC is they'll always have a good team. Just they recruit. I don't want to say recruit. They get transfers too, but it's a little bit different because there's a less population in the Big Bend, Tallahassee area, and the big schools, public schools, there are doing a better job of keeping their students. However, if I'm not mistaken, NFC had a pretty non-senior laden team last year, and I'll take their coaching over most any schools. So even if Champagnat is the favorite, if NFC gets there again, it's not going to be a cakewalk.
That's a fair. I agree with that. So
yeah, I mean, you're gonna have, you know, I mean, I would say that right now the safest bet is that we can expect them to dominate their region in Class 2A. They're down there in Region 4. I know you like Miami Christian, but again, it really, for me, it's never really about the talent level. When you run up against a school like, okay, let's just take, for instance, the last three teams in your top 50, Hunter. Madison County, Braden River, Central Catholic. Clearwater Central Catholic, excuse me. So Madison County, Braden River, CTC. Take those three teams, and do you feel comfortable from all aspects of the game? Offense, defense, depth, starters, return, the whole nine. Coaching, the whole nine. Do you feel comfortable with Champagnat and Miami Christian being able to go pound for pound, to blow for blow with Madison County, Braden River, and Clearwater Central Catholic? I'm just talking about 48, 49, and 50. Much less what you would talk about. Let's look at your middle team, Plant, Vieira, and Mainland. Not to mention in front of Plant, it's Trinity Christian. So for me, it's as much about it belonging within the poll as much as being able to stay in the poll. Now, Champagnat may be able to run through their 2A schedule. I would expect them to. At the same time, you get one or two injuries to a key person, to key people on a team. This isn't something that happens in a vacuum. Over time, we've seen this happen time and time again. Teams with studs, maybe at quarterback and running back, lose their running back or lose their quarterback or lose both and go from hero to zero very quickly. And so it's such a high risk, high reward to put teams, regardless of what you've seen in the movement, because those kids still have to gel. So it brings a lot of intrigue to me in those smaller classifications, because given the fact that 1A might be already, kind of signed, sealed, and delivered, you got to believe that 3A with Trinity Christian is going to be signed, sealed, and delivered. And then 4A, I know they put that with the big classes, but to me it's 1 through 4 and then 5 through 9, because 1 through 4 are still not even playing districts. 4A is still considered a small class. So, not to mention you've got, Cardinal Gibbons, Carroll City, and a few others that have gone into 4A that are not going to make things any easier. Tampa Catholic and Lakewood from our area have slipped down into 4A. So, when you look at even with how they could be probably translated to coming back and what they could be, the predictions are just as scary as the rankings, because of the movement. Back even 5 years ago, Eric can speak to this, even 5 years ago, we didn't have the movement that we had. We had a few that would transfer around. Tampa, seemed to always have one or two big transfers in the summertime, but now we're looking at a team like St. Petersburg that had, between graduation and transfers, they lost 33 of their 49 kids.
Wow.
11 were transfers.
And 11 were transfers, so a third of those 33 kids were transfers. And even in a county like Pinellas County, where school choice has been going on way longer than the state had implemented it, we never saw anything like that. And Eric, you could speak on that, because your home is...
I'd give it about 5 or 6 years. Previously, if you had one kid transfer from one, like I graduated in 2000, and I'd say from as long as I can remember prior to 2000, going back to my